live in interesting times. Today's stories. China and Russia urge against military action in Venezuela. President Trump predicts progress in Kim summit. Yemen rebels claim the World Food Program sent tainted food aid to Sana'a. 5,000 cases of leishmaniasis tropical disease have been registered in Libya. U.S. envoy to the United Nations Robert Wood rejects Venezuela's call for a Trump-Maduro meet. U.S. envoy asked the UN to address Venezuela's situation. Journalist detained by Venezuela's Maduro arrives in Miami. Michael Cohen testifies before the House Oversight Committee. Plus, Aid to Humanity warms a Bronx community with free winter wear and school supplies. Hello everyone, I'm Anna Cui, bringing you stories from around the globe. And this is Eagle News, Washington, D.C. The Chinese and Russian foreign ministers voiced their opposition to military action in Venezuela on Wednesday, as President Nicolas Maduro faces increasing pressure from the United States to step down. Russia and China, which have had close relations with Maduro over the years, have repeatedly warned against any foreign interference in Venezuela, while Washington has backed the opposition leader. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov repeated Moscow's assertion that the United States was using aid deliveries as a pretext to carry out military action in Venezuela.
Не менее нас озабочены перспективой силового решения. И не случайно руководство Бразилии, например, уже заявило, что они не будут. Соединенным Штатам следует прислушаться к мнению самих стран региона. И прежде всего мы рекомендуем сконцентрироваться на тех идеях, которые содержатся в так называемом механизме Монтевидео, который был сформирован Уругваем. Президент Мадуро уже не раз высказывал свою готовность к такому диалогу. К сожалению, господин Гуайдо и его окружение отвергают подобные предложения.
The United States is among some 50 countries that recognize opposition leader Juan Guaido as Venezuela's interim president, while Maduro still enjoys the diplomatic support of Russia and China. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Washington is not ruling out armed action, while U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said he was confident that Maduro's days are numbered. Earlier this week, the U.S. said it would ask the UN Security Council to adopt a draft resolution demanding that humanitarian aid be allowed into Venezuela, a major escalation in its diplomatic campaign in support of Guaido, and announced $56 million in aid to Venezuelans. Bloody violence erupted at Venezuela's blocked border last weekend as the country's security forces cracked down on opposition supporters trying to bring aid supplies across the bridge. China, which is one of Venezuela's main creditors, has maintained a stance of neutrality and non-interference, as Venezuela's economy is racked by hyperinflation and shortages of basic necessities amid the escalating power struggle between Maduro and Guaido.
委内瑞拉问题的本质是委内瑞拉的内政，应当由委内瑞拉的人民在宪法和法律的框架下，通过政治对话来找到合法合理的解决方案。
U.S. President Donald Trump shook hands with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the start of their second summit Wednesday, saying the totalitarian state could enjoy a brilliant future if it gives up nuclear weapons. Trump predicted a very successful summit as the pair prepared for dinner at the luxury Sofitel Legend Metropole Hotel in Hanoi to follow up on their initial historic meeting in Singapore in June. In a brief sit-down ahead of one-on-one talks, Trump repeated his view that North Korea had tremendous economic potential. For his part, Kim pledged to do his best to achieve an outcome that will be welcomed by all people.
Great to be with you. We had a very successful first summit. I felt it was very successful. And some people would like to see it go quicker. I'm satisfied, you're satisfied. We want to be happy with what we're doing. But I thought the first summit was a great success, and I think this one hopefully will be equal or greater than the first. And we made a lot of progress, and I think the biggest progress was our relationship is really a good one. And as I've said many times, and I say it to the press, I say it to anybody that wants to listen, I think that your country has tremendous economic potential, unbelievable, unlimited. And I think that you will have a tremendous future with your country, a great leader. And I look forward to watching it happen and helping it to happen. And we will help it to happen.
The president risked being distracted by scandal back in Washington, where his former lawyer Michael Cohen was set to describe him as a con man in bombshell testimony to Congress scheduled for shortly after the summit dinner ends on the other side of the world. But Trump, seeking a big foreign policy win to push back against domestic troubles, believes he can make history with North Korea, and claims Japan's prime minister has already nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize. His goal is to persuade Kim to dismantle his nuclear weapons and resolve a standoff with a totalitarian state that has bedeviled U.S. leaders since the end of the Korean War in 1953. To lure Kim into radical change, Trump is believed to be considering offering a formal peace declaration, though perhaps not a formal treaty, to draw a line under the technically still unfinished war. At the same time, Washington faces mounting pressure to extract significant concessions from Kim, who has so far shown little desire to ditch his nuclear capability. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said Wednesday the Hanoi meeting could be an important step towards advancing the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. However, Washington and Pyongyang disagree even on what denuclearization means precisely. And while North Korea has now gone more than a year without conducting missile and nuclear tests, it has done nothing to roll back the weapons already built. Houthi officials inspect bags of flour and green peas stamped with the World Food Program or WFP logo, which they say is not suitable for human consumption, in a warehouse in rebel-held Sana'a. The Houthi rebels accuse WFP of sending rotten food aid to the Yemen capital.
الشعب اليمني يعاني من حصار خارجي وداخلي ومن أمراض لا نعرف ما هي مصدرها، فعليهم أن يتقوا الله في موادهم الذي يجلبونها إلى اليمن، يجلبونها لأجل مساعدة الشعب اليمني، وإنما هي تكون يعني مصدر الموت هذا الشعب.
الظروف الاقتصادية صعبة جدا وخاصة على النازحين وعلى المحتاجين، فيعني نتمنى أن تكون هذه الأغذية صالحة للاستهلاك الآدمي وعدم تعريض مثل هذا من النازحين لأخطار صحية تفوق الأخطار الذي كان نتيجة الجوع الذي سيتعرضون له.
Patients with leishmaniasis are treated in a hospital in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Libya's health ministry said Wednesday at least 5,000 cases of leishmaniasis, a tropical disease which can be deadly, have been registered in Libya in the past 6 months. A warning to our viewers, what you are about to see have graphic images of open wounds.
وصبت اثناء حسب توقعاتي انا اثناء جني الزيتون ثمار الزيتون اللي احتمال الكلام هذا في شهر 12 فاحتمال طلعوا بقعات صغيرات جزء هيك لكن حسابه وشوشه عاديه يعني فاستمر يمكن لغايه بعد شهر وشهر شويه طلعت التقرحات هذه.
الاعداد المستهدفه بالعلاج حاليا واصلين الى فوق حدود 5000 حاله اللي مسجله. طبعا احنا عندنا طريقه خاصه وعندنا اليه معينه نديروا فيها.
Coming up, U.S. envoy to the United Nations, Robert Wood, rejects Venezuela's call for a Trump-Maduro meet. U.S. envoy asked the UN to address Venezuela's situation. Journalist detained by Venezuela's Maduro arrives in Miami. Michael Cohen testifies before the House Oversight Committee. Eagle News, Washington, D.C. will be right back. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News, Washington, D.C. American envoy to the UN's Conference on Disarmament, Robert Wood, walks out of a meeting of the United Nations Human Rights Council in protest as a representative of Nicolas Maduro's Venezuelan government, Felix Plasencia, takes the podium. Venezuela's foreign minister on Wednesday called for direct talks between President Nicolas Maduro and his U.S. counterpart, Donald Trump, to help ease the crisis in the country. The call from Venezuela's top diplomat Jorge Arriaza came in an address to the United Nations Human Rights Council that was boycotted by multiple diplomats, including from Latin America and Europe. Arriaza said, quote, "We are proposing the path of dialogue, even with the United States. Why shouldn't they meet President Trump and President Maduro?" The United States does not sit in the Rights Council following Trump's decision to quit the body last year.
No, President Trump is prepared to meet with the rightful president of Venezuela, and that is Juan Guaido. For the first time that, certainly in my time here, and I think maybe in the history of the CD, where you had a number of countries walk out of the chamber, just as a representative of the Maduro regime in Venezuela was about to speak. I think it sent a very powerful message.
The U.S. has led a diplomatic campaign in support of opposition leader Guaido, who has declared himself interim president and is recognized by about 50 countries, notably within the EU. Arriaza denounced what he described as a campaign of aggression being perpetrated by the United States against Venezuela, including an international assault on the government's foreign assets. He said Washington's action were depriving ordinary Venezuelans of food and medicine and called on the Rights Council to raise its voice against the American blockade. Wood said it was a disgrace that Maduro's representatives were being allowed to address UN bodies.
It was very clear that this illegitimate regime it had no business being in that hall. That chair, as I mentioned today, belongs to the people of Venezuela, obviously, but specifically to the government of Juan Guaido, the interim president of Venezuela.
The former Maduro regime should not be allowed to try to continue to represent the Venezuelan people and to conduct its malign behavior with impunity. My government again calls on representatives of the former Maduro regime not to assume the chair in this chamber reserved for the government of Venezuela.
The U.S. has ramped up the pressure on the Maduro regime with sanctions against top officials and the promise to exempt those who recognize Guaido as their true leader. According to the UN, an estimated 2.7 million people are estimated to have fled Venezuela since a devastating political and economic crisis engulfed the country in 2015. Slamming President Nicolas Maduro's corrupt, fraudulent, and incompetent reign, the United States said Tuesday it would ask the UN Security Council to adopt a draft resolution demanding that humanitarian aid be allowed into Venezuela. President Donald Trump's envoy for Venezuela, Elliot Abrams, said a vote was expected this week at the Council, even though such a measure is likely to face a veto from Russia and China.
The United States and the international community must support the Venezuelan people as they strive to reclaim their democracy. We should respect their constitution and their sovereignty, which is why we must support Juan Guaido's interim presidency.
The push for a UN vote marked a major escalation in the U.S. diplomatic campaign in support of Juan Guaido, the opposition leader who has declared himself interim president and is recognized by about 50 countries. 4 people died in clashes over the weekend on Venezuela's borders during a bid by Guaido to defy Maduro and bring in humanitarian aid to help Venezuelans during a dire economic crisis. Maduro has accused the United States of using aid as a political tool aimed at overthrowing him and blames U.S. sanctions for the economic turmoil in his country.
And we must address the destabilizing results of Maduro's corrupt, fraudulent, and incompetent reign, which just this weekend brought instability and violence to the borders of 2 other member states, Brazil and Colombia.
Le premier objectif est de promouvoir une sortie négociée et pacifique à la crise, car il faut éviter un recours à la force et à la violence au Venezuela. La France souhaite insister particulièrement sur ce point. Il ne peut y avoir de solution que politique et pacifique, et une telle solution implique l'organisation aussi rapide que possible d'élections présidentielles démocratiques.
Nosotros denunciamos al gobierno de los Estados Unidos por organizar, por financiar, por liderar esta grosera agresión contra Venezuela.
Jorge Ramos, a journalist from U.S.-based television network Univision, says his crew was detained for more than 2 hours in Venezuela after offending President Nicolas Maduro during an interview by asking questions on poverty and his legitimacy to govern. Univision, one of the biggest Spanish-language TV networks in the United States, said Maduro disliked the questions in the interview and stopped the recording, confiscated the equipment, and detained the 6 journalists. The network added the crew of 6 Univision Noticias journalists, headed by Jorge Ramos, was released after being held at the Miraflores Palace for nearly 3 hours on the orders of Nicolas Maduro. Ramos told Univision that the entire team had later arrived back at their hotel. The journalist said he had showed Maduro footage of children sifting through garbage for something to eat, and that Maduro halted the interview and left.
En el momento que yo le presento estas imágenes de los niños comiendo basura, él no aguanta más, se rompe, trata tontamente de tapar la imagen y se va. Cuando se va le digo, ¿por qué no contesta las preguntas? Lo que usted está haciendo no es de un demócrata, lo que usted está haciendo es de un dictador.
Ramos said he had brought up opposition leader and self-declared interim president Juan Guaido's charges that Maduro has effectively usurped power because Guaido argues Maduro won re-election last year through fraud.
We were detained against our will. They took away 4 cameras. They took away the video cards where we take the interview. They took away our cell phones. And just last night at 1 a.m., they gave me back my cell phone, but my cell phone has no content.
Take care. How you doing?
He said he and his team hope to get their equipment back and fly to Miami Tuesday. Guaido tweeted about the incident with Ramos, saying Maduro's, quote, desperation is greater every day. He could not answer his questions. The U.S. State Department earlier said it had been notified that Ramos and his team were being held against their will at the Miraflores. It tweeted, we insist on their immediate release. The world is watching. Donald Trump's former personal lawyer Michael Cohen called the president a con man, a cheat, and a racist in explosive testimony prepared for a hearing in Congress Wednesday. He said Trump directed him in an illegal scheme to pay hush money to an adult film star and knew in advance in 2016 that WikiLeaks would publish dirt on Hillary Clinton, despite Trump's denials of both. He also said that Trump directed negotiations for a Trump Tower in Moscow through the 2016 election campaign, even while denying any business ties with the Russians. And Cohen said White House lawyers reviewed and edited his testimony in 2017 when he lied to Congress about the Trump Tower negotiations.
I wouldn't use the word colluding. Was there something odd about the back and forth praise with President Putin? Yes, but I'm not really sure that I can answer that question in terms of collusion. I was not part of the campaign. I don't know the other conversations that Mr. Trump had with other individuals. The lies that I told to Congress, in fairness, benefited Mr. Trump. It was in furtherance of my protection of Mr. Trump, which I stated in my testimony. And I am not protecting Mr. Trump anymore. And so, while I truly appreciate taking some of your time onto it, to attack me every single time about taxes, I have no credibility. It's for exactly that reason that I spent the last week searching boxes in order to find the information that I did, so that you don't have to take my word for it.
However, 52-year-old Cohen also said he had no direct evidence that Trump or his 2016 campaign colluded with Russians, the central focus of Justice Department and congressional investigations. Cohen, who has been sentenced to 3 years in jail for crimes related in part to his work for Trump, said he was ashamed of his decade-long role as the president's personal lawyer and fixer for sensitive problems. Cohen said, quote, "I am ashamed because I know what Mr. Trump is. He is a racist, he is a con man, he is a cheat." The early release of the testimony underscored that the hearing Wednesday would be fiery, with Democrats aiming to undermine the president 2 years ahead of the next elections and Republicans determined to defend him. Trump in Vietnam for a second nuclear summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un responded to the release of the statement by trying to discredit Cohen. Trump tweeted, "Michael Cohen was one of my many lawyers who represented me, unfortunately. He was just disbarred by the state Supreme Court for lying and fraud. He did bad things unrelated to Trump. He is lying in order to reduce his prison time." When we come back, Aid to Humanity warms a Bronx community with free winter wear and school supplies. Eagle News, Washington, D.C. will return shortly. This is Eagle News, Washington, D.C. I'm Anna Cui. Reaching out to an underprivileged community in Bronx, the Aid to Humanity warms hearts with free winter wear and supplies. Eagle News correspondent Des Anderson with the story.
We're in the Bronx River Community Centre, where hundreds of locals are coming together on this Martin Luther King Day of Service. The Iglesia Ni Cristo is holding an Aid to Humanity event to promote literacy and education by giving away free school supplies, books and winter wear.
Bronx River houses, there's close to 6,000 residents that live here. 65% Hispanic, and the rest, African American. So 100% people of color in this community, and we're talking about a community that has been deprived of resources from the day of birth. They're born in this community.
It could be in this community. It could be anywhere. Right now, the country's going in a really bad place. It's not too good it's not looking good for us.
And we're glad we got the community center here, try to help them with their kids and make everything better for them.
They're giving away backpacks, coats, especially in a day like today where it's 8 degrees. There's families that definitely need some coats. So it's definitely things that we need in our community.
This is a form of getting everybody together and coming to do something so positive for the community, for everybody.
Well, I've seen that they're giving out the toys, coats, and other goods for the kids for school. And that is beautiful. It is great to have churches, to have volunteers, and all around. Everybody should do that because that is great for everybody.
It's a good church, and I thank y'all very much for coming out and doing what y'all doing.
I believe a lot of people don't have access to churches, or churches don't really reach out to our community the way they should. And the outreach that this church in particular did over here was phenomenal.
To get the community to come and show love and to show all of us there's still hope. We still show the community it's hard, but we still have hope.
The temperature outside is in the single digits, but that still didn't stop the local families and kids and members of the INC from doing their part to help the community and fulfill a day of service. Reporting for EBC, Des Anderson in the Bronx, New York. I am one with 25.
Thank you, Des. That is today's Eagle News, Washington, D.C. Join us tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at Eaglenews.PH and EagleNewsLive.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Twitter.com/EagleNewsPH. Thank you for watching. I'm Anna Cui, and I am one with 25.